For years since the original Optic roster disbanded, NRG struggled through numerous roster changes and disappointing finishes. Each roster had incredible potential and flashes of brilliance, but they always ended in heartbreaking losses and a lingering feeling of maybe next time. Well, 2025 started with another amazing offseason, but when the real matches began, we saw the same disappointing finishes and a very controversial roster change that left fans confused. And by stage 2, everyone had counted NRG out. Their form was shaky, their past haunted them, and their rivals looked stronger than ever. But somehow, some way, this was the year that everything changed.
Standing tall, you feel like you're trying to just pick whichever option is better, but it's Mork on one side, joined by East. I don't think they can, but 9 seconds, and no, Mana! Breaking him in two! So, a little bit of a difference in possession! What a shot! To the half. Oh my God!
Through failure after failure, NRG had created something amazing. They created a team built on resilience, trust, and lessons from all their past struggles going back to the very beginning. This is the story of how NRG turned their years of hardship into a VCT championship that no one saw coming. To understand how NRG lifted the trophy in 2025, we need to rewind to the start of 2023, the beginning of franchising, because every roster change, every setback, and every failure along the way directly shaped their championship run 2 years later. When NRG picked up the Optic core, expectations were sky high. Sure, they lost Ye, arguably the best player in the world at the time, but by adding artists, they still had 4 out of 5 players with proven championship winning experience. But as the 2023 season kicked off, NRG immediately ran into problems that many teams faced at the time: role issues. Chamber had just been patched out of the meta, and NRG's plan for Artis to seamlessly slot into Ye's agent pool completely fell apart. Artis was obviously a very strong duelist on Jett, but a huge part of his impact on FPX in 2022 also came from his chamber play, and without that, NRG's team structure started to unravel. Players were forced into less familiar roles, and the system that once made this core a title contender suddenly didn't function the same way. When Optic were on top of the world, the roles were perfectly balanced. FNS lurked on Viper and Killjoy, Ye fought everything on Chamber, Crashies provided crucial support on Initiator, and Victor was an incredible space creator on Duelist. Yes, there were maps where Ye switched to Jett, but those always seemed like their weakest. The moment they broke away from those roles, their entire system lost its edge. Even during their championship run at Masters Reykjavik, we can see that Ascent was one of their weaker maps of the tournament. Ascent's meta at the time meant that Optic weren't able to replicate the same formula that made them so dominant on the other maps. And later that year at Champions, when they finished second, the story was pretty similar. Without Victor on Duelist and Ye on Chamber, Optic looked much closer to an average team. With all that context in mind, it's easy to see the challenge that 2023 NRG faced. At best, they would look like Optic did on Ascent unless they completely rebuilt their system from the ground up, and that's exactly what they set out to do. In the opening weeks of the 2023 season, NRG experimented heavily. Roles were constantly shifting across their map pool. FNS moved to Initiator, different players rotated on Killjoy depending on the map, and Victor and Artis swapped between Duelist and other flex roles. The only constant during this chaotic stretch was Song, who looked the most comfortable and consistent in his role. But the big problem was that the new franchising format left no room for trial and error. And within weeks, NRG were 1-3 and dangerously close to missing playoffs. Just in time, they made a crucial adjustment. FNS returned to his signature Lurky Viper and Killjoy roles, Crashies locked back into main Initiator, and Victor and Artis traded between Duelist and Sentinel depending on the map. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it brought back a sense of familiarity reminiscent of their 2022 structure, and that was enough to earn them second place in Americas and punch their ticket to Masters Tokyo. Although a different version of this problem came up in 2024, which we'll touch on more later, NRG had learned a crucial lesson from both these experiences. Clear roles and strong agent pools were not optional. They were essential for a roster to survive in the evolving Valorant metas, and that's exactly what they kept in mind for their championship roster in 2025. Scuba is the perfect example of a player that NRG needed to balance flexibility with structure. For most of his career, he was an excellent controller player, but more recently transitioned to Sentinel. This shift ended up being extremely valuable for NRG because it gave them the flexibility to comfortably run Viper-based comps, which became increasingly important later on in the season. Throughout the run, NRG showcased a wide variety of team comps, and this was only possible because Ethan, Scuba, and Brock had just enough flexibility to cover different roles without sacrificing the team's core identity. The key to making these swaps work was how NRG set up across the map. Even when players were on different agents, the team deliberately positioned them to keep their in-game responsibilities consistent. A great example of this is NRG's Lotus comp, where Brock played Vice while Scuba played Viper. On attack, Scuba continued to play weak side, spreading map control and creating pressure, just like he had always done on the Sentinel role. Meanwhile, even though Brock was on Vice, an agent many would associate with lurking, he played alongside the team on the strong side during almost every attack round. His ability to read situations and support with his Odin spam made him a natural fit, so why not keep him there despite playing a different agent? Some might argue that this isn't the optimal way to play those agents, but NRG demonstrated that you can run different comps without losing your team's core structure if you adapt your setups intelligently. Ethan provided another example of this when he swapped to Omen on Abyss. On attack, he still opened up rounds with his own mid defaults, but instead of choosing to split from his team all the time, he preferred to regroup with his team. And this all works fine on attack since setups are much less rigid. Defense, however, is where things become trickier. Structural rules are tighter and role deviations are harder to cover. Brock, for instance, had to take on more anchor duties than usual when he was playing Vice on Lotus, but NRG still made adjustments to keep him comfortable. You can see that Scuba was the one often sent to play the weak side anchor, while Brock held B as the first rotator, and this let him stay involved with the team far more than a typical Vice player would. These kinds of small structural tweaks go a long way towards preserving team comfort and maintaining system integrity. But of course, there are going to be trade-offs. We can kind of see this pattern reflected in NRG's defensive win rates on maps where role deviations were present. On maps like Lotus, Abyss, and Haven, where Som played Viper and Ethan played Omen, NRG looks slightly weaker on defense at Champs, showing that even well-designed adjustments have limits, but these compromises clearly still paid off for NRG. NRG's struggles in 2023 helped teach them valuable lessons, but some of these problems continued on into next year in a different form. 2024 was another crucial learning year for NRG. After a disappointing showing at Champs 2023, FNS, Som, and Artis parted ways with the organization. In the offseason, NRG brought in Ethan, Demon One, and Marv, instantly creating what many considered a new North American super team. On paper, this roster had everything: firepower, experience, and star power. But when the season actually began, cracks started to show. NRG's kickoff performance was solid, and they narrowly missed out on Madrid qualification by a single map against Sentinels. However, once Stage 1 started, it became more and more clear that something fundamental was missing. Demon One wasn't replicating his 2023 form, and Ethan quickly became a target of criticism for his IGLing. There were definitely role issues on this roster, something that I covered in a video back then, talking about Demon One's playstyle fit, but the real underlying problem across the team could be explained in an even simpler way. Despite having individually talented players across every position, NRG had lost their core. FNS and Som weren't just any players, they were the glue that held their system together. Their departure left the team without the foundation that allowed everyone else to thrive in the first place. This pattern isn't unique to a team like NRG. We've seen it play out across multiple different rosters in multiple different regions. Fnatic is a perfect example. Year after year, they remain competitive despite swapping players in and out, because their core of Alpha and Kron under Boaster's leadership stays intact. G2 showed the same thing in Stage 2 this year, maintaining success even after replacing Leaf with Baby Bay. On the flip side, this is also why superstars often struggle to replicate their impact after leaving their original teams. Their success was built within a specific system and structure, and without that, even the most individually talented players can look a bit lost. It's the same reason why Demon One and Ethan fit so seamlessly into EG back in 2023. They obviously added a lot of their own value, but they joined an established 2022 core of Calm, Jogamo, and Boostio, who already had a system that was functioning at a high level. A strong core and a functioning system is the first priority for a team to be competitive, and that's exactly what NRG lacked at the start of 2024. It's also why that later in the season, they decided to bring back FNS and Som. Under FNS's leadership in Stage 2, NRG looked noticeably more cohesive. However, they still weren't able to achieve better results than what the Demon 1 roster achieved. On the surface, the 2024 season might have looked like a failure, but in reality, it was a necessary step towards their championship win in 2025. These experiences in 2024, combined with their experiences from the early 2025 season, really helped shape the present-day championship-winning NRG core, and let me explain why. Ethan's first IGLing experience on the Demon 1 roster was a failure, but it gave him really important perspectives on what it takes to be an IGL beyond calling strategies in the game. These perspectives were further reinforced when FNS joined, and he was able to learn from someone who was a more natural leader and someone who had already done it successfully for years. Here are a couple interview clips of Ethan speaking about his 2024 IGLing experience and how much nicer it was to have FNS come back to be a leader.
Yeah, I mean, the leadership role obviously has been changed to John, and he's just built for that. He's natural. He's like a true leader. That was a big thing. And then for me, it helps a lot going back into my comfort role. I know what I'm good at, and being able to do that exclusively I think it helps the team a lot too. I'm definitely excited to kind of just help John with stuff. I think that's where I'm supposed to be. I don't think I'm built to IGL. It was cool. It was cool to do it for a little bit. You know, I filled the role because, you know, I had to step up and do it, but I'm glad I don't have to anymore. But just being a leader is something that can't just like become overnight. Honestly, you either have to be just built for it or you have to do it for a really long time. One, it just didn't have the time, and two, just naturally just not who I am. I'm more of like a support element to whoever is leading.
Without the failures of 2024, Ethan would have never become the IGL he needed to be by 2025. And it's clear that he took the lessons he learned from 2024 and applied them to NRG this year.
I think how I used to be, I think I supplemented my IGL a lot. You know, I would add things, I would sometimes correct things, but now it's kind of flipped. So now I'm taking all those ideas and I'm twisting it into how I want to do things and how we think we should run the team. So in some way it was kind of a 180, but there are certain things I brought over. I guess unlike EG was the most recent team I didn't IGL on. It was way more like second seat. Now it's a little bit more of a balance. I have to make sure, you know, everyone on the team is comfortable with what they're doing and also still prioritize my individual stuff.
The 2024 roster change also reunited Som with Ethan, who played together on an earlier 2022 NRG roster. These two together with FNS became the initial 2025 core and added talented rookies Verno and Mata to the team. Even the failures from that early 2025 roster were incredibly important for helping develop Mata into a core player for the future. Although FNS was never able to achieve very great results in his return to NRG, I think that without his presence throughout the end of 2024 and beginning of 2025, the team would have never seen the growth necessary for the 2025 roster to be so good. NRG management really made good decisions throughout this period, as they only made incremental changes on top of keeping core elements that worked well, instead of nuking the entire roster. When FNS ultimately stepped down, NRG had already matured to a point where they could function without him, and only needed to find their final piece in Scuba. Scuba was exactly what NRG needed, role-wise, personality-wise, and agent pool-wise. He'd always been on the radar of tier 1 teams throughout the history of Pro Valorant, but once he joined a roster with a world-class core, everything started to click. His impact was immediate, and he quickly became, in my opinion, one of the best clutch players we've ever seen in Valorant. NRG's years of roster struggles should serve as a message to every single team. Failure isn't the end. It's a crucial part of long-term growth. What really separates the great teams from the rest of them isn't avoiding mistakes or failures, but it's how well they learn from them and capitalize on those lessons in the long run. For most of this video, I've been talking about NRG's team building journey, how years of roster moves and failures eventually shaped the perfect roster they have today. But I also want to highlight some real gameplay differences that 2025 NRG have from their previous versions. Let's go back to their famous Masters Tokyo run. Most people remember the now infamous Som Cove incident. Honestly, I still don't think it was that bad of a play once you consider all the factors. But what most people forget is that NRG had an opportunity to close out the map several rounds earlier. In round 24, right before the map went to overtime, NRG opened with first blood towards A main. Then they looked to transition into an A exec. This drew rotations and allowed Crashies to find a perfect timing kill in B link, while FNS took deep control up B site. At this point, it's a 4v3, with NRG holding both spawn control and pressure in B link. This should be an easy round win for them, but FNS gets a bit too greedy.
Divine Does he read this one? The answer is yes. Finesse gonna be taking.
He pushes too far into spawn, gets caught, and that single mistake throws the entire round. Devi now has space to scale back up to B, disrupt the spike plant, and steal the round back. This round came down to an individual mistake, which compromised a good team opportunity to close out the round. And I wanted to bring it up because a lot of people genuinely think the Som Cove clip is why NRG lost this map. At this level of Valorant, it's rarely one flashy moment that decides a game. Instead, it's about consistently executing team play and minimizing those critical mistakes. And that's why NRG's team play at Champs this year stood out so much, because they were an amazing example of good team play in every single round. Their play patterns always prioritized team play over individual moments, and this was a case whether they were down, up, or even in numbers. Here are some underrated team play details in a crucial defense round NRG won against MIBR, who were attacking on Corrode. This round starts with MIBR pressuring mid so they can bait out NRG's Viper wall. As soon as they get NRG to activate the wall, you can see MIBR working towards B main, hoping that the wall has no juice left when they exec. But Scuba knows his team has already lost control of mid, so he takes it down to save juice. This helps Scuba stall just a little bit more time off of MIBR's execute. Ethan and Scuba plan to fight the exec, but once MIBR earned first blood on Ethan, Scuba immediately falls back deep into elbow. Even though it's a 4v5 retake with bad map control, as you can see it's going to be a spawn and B-link retake, Scuba does not go for a big solo play. He plays a safe angle so he can fall back and join up with his team, and we're going to see exactly why NRG consistently makes this choice. When Som joins up with Scuba in spawn, MIBR already have full control of elbow. Som's Omen Blind protects Scuba from getting pushed alone before he gets there, and then the two start retaking. The details here are extremely important. Scuba prepares to wide swing on the far angle, but Som jiggle pre-fires from the close one, which creates enough of a distraction for Aspas to miss. Som shoots another covering shot for Scuba to swing the next angle, and now they've somehow taken back full control of elbow. A round that should have been hard to win looks really easy and becomes possible because of the perfect fundamental team play from NRG. People will say that Som got a bit lucky at the end, but with the bomb halved and smoked, he still had a good advantage regardless of if he killed both players or not. NRG relying on team play in a high pressure overtime round, despite the map state, is exactly what made this team so awesome. And this mentality was also reflected in how they called their attack sides. I really liked their attack side patterns, where they would start in amazing defaults to create question marks for defenders, but they always chose to prioritize team execs rather than individual lurk plays or timings. In this round on Abyss, NRG starts with default control with their controller utility in both mains. This keeps MIBR's defenders focused on the mains a bit longer, while NRG's real plan is to pressure mid. Because of the Harbor Cascade towards B, Cypher is late rotating to mid, which gives Mata a good timing to cross B link. Now NRG have full control of mid, and most teams would try to explicitly use this control to find a kill, but instead, all 5 NRG players start grouping back up in A main. While MIBR are still worried about that mid pressure, NRG hit A as 5, and you can see that without the extra bodies, MIBR would have likely won this fight in A main. To be fair, it's not tactically optimal to always give up that mid control, but that's exactly my point. NRG have always had strong strategic ideas, but what separated their 2025 roster was their willingness to prioritize team play over finding the perfect tactical answer every time. They understood that consistency doesn't always come from the smartest call, but from the one that gets everybody on the same page quicker. If we go back to the Masters Tokyo example, the best tactical decision at the time may have been to run the spike back to B and play off FNS's lurk, but I'm confident that 2025 NRG would have approached this situation completely differently. Instead of splitting up, they likely would have prioritized helping artists escape A, or simply grouped up together way earlier to commit to a site hit as a unit. This shift in mentality is subtle but huge. Playing this way builds trust, reinforces structure, and makes a team far less prone to the kinds of collapses we saw in 2023 and 2024. 2025 NRG didn't always make the perfect call, but they consistently made good, unified decisions, and that's what ultimately won them a championship. Another important gameplay lesson was learned when NRG lost to BLG in 2023. NRG had a big problem with their post plans during this time and looked lost on what they wanted to achieve. They would often end up in positions that couldn't actively help one another or depended on individuals winning solo fights. This is a really big contrast to how 2025 NRG played out these rounds, where it's clear all 5 players are on the same page about what they want to do before they even hit the site. In this post plant on Lotus, you can see that all players are on the same page that they're gonna challenge backside together. When Ethan is killed jump spotting, the rest of NRG are all in position to capitalize and deny Fnatic a retake attempt. This corrode exec is even more impressive. With only 20 seconds left to exec and only 1 smoke on Psalm, NRG immediately get on the same page about crunching elbow with Psalm TPing into heaven. Before Ethan plants the bomb, he even gets a flash off into elbow, and NRG completely dominate this round. I have yet to see a team more decisive and creative in how they want to play their post plants than 2025 NRG. The final thing I want to talk about is the last major gameplay lesson that NRG learned from their 2024 roster. 2024 NRG had a very strong attack side, but a terrible defense side, and this was largely because of how stale and static they were in the mid round. During their infamous loss against C9 on Sunset, NRG let C9 get any control they wanted at the start of rounds. This made it incredibly hard for them to read what C9 were doing and gave them very weak positions to defend or play retake. NRG already looked like they addressed this issue by the offseason after Bonkar became the coach of the team, but this obviously carried over into their eventual champs run as well. Here's an incredible eco round from NRG against Fnatic on corrode, where they start with taking A main control. They get Mata the ult orb, and all 3 players immediately move to A link while Ethan moves to top mid from B. Moments after creating A main pressure, they've already set up a fight in mid with 4 players, and Fnatic go down 2 players to classics. Although they didn't end up closing out this round, this defensive proactivity was something that NRG learned from their 2024 losses, and who knows, without those important lessons from their 2024 loss against C9, it's possible that NRG never develops the defense side they need to close out champs in 2025. In many ways, NRG's 2025 championship wasn't built in a single season. It was forged through years of trial, error, and hard lessons. Every roster change, every disappointing performance, and every heartbreaking loss was another step in the process of refining a championship winning team. They learned that superstar talent alone does not win championships. Strong systems and a clear core do. They learned just how fragile success can be when that core disappears and how it has to be rebuilt through proper leadership, teamwork, and trust. They learned to value consistency, that sometimes the best call isn't the perfect strat on paper, but the one that gets everyone on the same page quicker. Every step of their journey sharpened their understanding of the game, from better post plants to more proactive defenses, and ultimately they perfected their team play. When you look at NRG in 2025, what you're seeing isn't just a roster that clicked overnight. You're seeing the product of years spent learning from their mistakes and making incremental improvements. Their journey should be a reminder to every team. Failure isn't the end, it's the foundation for something greater, but only if you're willing to learn from it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.